So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome in. Sneaking in. Right?
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome. Good to be back here. Feels like it's been just a little bit with some of the hit and miss with scheduling. So, to begin, my name's Taylor Goodwin. I'm a naturopathic doctor. Often I get asked, what the heck is a neuro something, whatever you said, doctor? Naturopath. So a naturopathic doctor is a doctor who went through medical school, which is a good start, but specialized in alternative medicine. And so that includes things like diet and lifestyle got a lot of extra emphasis. We also learned pharmaceuticals and things, but we also learned things like hydrotherapy, acupuncture, and herbs. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I've kind of been an herb nerd for a long time. When I was about yay tall, my mom unknowingly gave me the seed of my infatuation, a little book from like Reader's Digest or something super clinical. And it had something like 60 herbs, and they were in alphabetical order, and I just got in there and I started reading about all the little tidbits and the stories they had with them, and soon she was, instead of calling me off of my Super Nintendo, she was calling me out of the neighbor's yard and saying, "Stop picking their weeds, please." So I've matured. Now my wife calls me out of the neighbor's yard. But there are really fascinating and amazing things that are in this area. So when I was going through medical school back in Arizona, we had what was called a materia medica of herbal plants that were like, these are active, they do things, there's research and tradition, both that show some use. And we would get to see them. We'd go out to our little garden. We had some of the desert plants there, because Arizona, in case you didn't know, is a desert. And then we would get to see the rest of the plants in bottles, because that's what we had. I moved out here about a year ago, and you guys have like half of the entire materia medica growing wild in the Ozarks. It's incredible, and so now you have to live with me being here. Because it's really nice. I go on a walk and it's like, oh, there's one, two dozen. It's really cool. So, few things about, we're going to talk about some of the cool uses and some cool stories and stuff about plants. We're going to talk about some that grow here natively. We're going to talk about two that are quite useful, and two that are useful if you don't like your relatives. They're poisonous. So we need to be familiar with both, because knowing what the good guys look like is helpful. Knowing what the lookalikes look like is how we stay safe. So we're going to go over those. But besides just those, I like to break up these presentations into 3 parts, because safety is so important in this kind of a field, because any place where a small mistake can lead to a large consequence, we need to give a little bit of time to the safety side of things. So first of 3 parts, we'll go over safety tips. They're also on the handout, most of them. But second of 3 parts, we'll go over identification, medicinal uses, lookalikes, and just some fun lore of the history of the plants. And part 3, we almost never have a part 3 because I run my mouth a lot. So, but part 3 is supposed to be, you can ask questions, and I talk about upcoming events, and it's usually about 60 seconds long, and you'll see that. But feel free to ask questions throughout. I've stopped trusting myself to leave time at the end. So, with that, I'll go ahead and dive into the part you're all here for, safety, riveting. So for this, I like to tell a little bit of a story. So I was in my undergrad, and I was in automotive industrial management, exactly what you would expect. And I kept sneaking biology classes, but one day I got to sneak something else. A friend of mine said, hey, there's this herbalist, or actually he was more of a wildcrafter, forager is what you usually call him. He didn't know too much about herbalism, it was foraging. And he's pretty renowned. He knows his stuff, he has a book, he does it as a living. And I've managed to get so that I can bring any 15 friends I want on a free walk with him. And I was like, all right, my first time playing hooky is upon me. And I spent the day with him in some of the Rocky Mountains, and we went on this trip. We started at a library, which is poetic for today. And he had all these samples of plants and things, and one of them lit my mouth on icy fire, and it was great. It was like one of those super powerful mints. It's like nature had them first. So I think it was horse mint, but my memory's a little loose on that. But we started going off into the Rocky Mountains, and we started pointing out plants. This is stone crop, also called sedum, edible, little mossy looking thing, but spikier, and it grows on boulders. It's really fun to watch it go through the crevices. And we walk a little further. Right there is Ligusticum papori, or porteri, and also known as osha, which is a very sacred plant to the Native Americans in this area, and multiple areas actually. There's lots of history between Native Americans and that plant. It's also called bear plant. Fun stories there. And he said, it's endangered, so we're not going to harvest it or anything, but let's go ahead and scratch the root and smell it. And it smelled to me like butterscotch, because my nose is broken. To everyone else, it smelled like something that I should probably re-look up, because not everyone else has my broken nose. But it smelled nice. And then we kept walking, and we finally got to kind of an opening. Instead of kind of a side-windy path that we were on, we got to an opening, a vista. It was beautiful. And then, after a little bit of a rest and some snacks of varying degrees of, healthy and naturopathically approved, I brought Cheetos. It was great. So there were a few more plants, as you might expect, not on the kind of terrain that's mountainside-ish, but valley-ish. And one of those was a tall plant that had, you guys have seen clover blossoms, right? Those little pom-poms that are about yay tall. Well, there was a taller one, and you stretch one of those pom-poms out, but the leaves and other things, there's some similarities between them. And this is called sweet clover, yellow flowers. And he started talking about, you can make a great, mini multivitamin, multi-mineral tea, because it's known for having a lot of different nutrients in it. And he was talking about that, and someone in the group rose their hand and said, got a question for you. What about the ergot fungus? And he's like, well, it sounds like you know about it. Why don't you tell us about it? And this individual proceeded to say, I'm going to put it in my own words instead of his, but in the 1800s, the late 1800s, if I recall correctly, a lot of cattle were found dead in fields, and no one could figure out why. Long story short, very long story short, someone finally figured it out in the early 1900s that people were starting to bale sweet clover, and with balers and things becoming more prevalent, it was just in the bale, and then it would dry, and then it would get fungus on it, because fungus loves sweet clover a lot, and it was ergot fungus. That fungus will change the plant compounds into something from coumarin to coumadin for the nerds out there. It changed it from good to bad for the non-nerds out there. Who am I kidding? We're all here in a plant that we're but YouTube maybe. You misclicked. But the blood thinner warfarin is coumadin. And that's where we got it from, was people finally figured out why the cows were dying. It came from sweet clover originally, or the fungus that grows on sweet clover. And so that's pretty important. So coming back to the little time with Cattail Bob Seebeck was the individual, and maybe he was going to remember to mention, by the way, if sweet clover ever has fungus on it, don't eat it. Probably should be self-evident, but be careful to look for it. But he might have forgotten to say that. We don't know, because he got interrupted. We'll pretend that he was going to. But I tell this story for three things. 3 reasons. Number one, when a presentation is being given on edible medicinal plants or anything where a small mistake can have big consequences, the presenter occasionally will just forget to mention something important. So we always treat a presentation where it's a one-off thing. We don't just go off and harvest plants right after. We do our homework and try to have more than one source. That's what I would like to encourage, more than one source. Hello, my name is Dr. Goodwin. I am one source, not more than one source. And that helps keep us safe and make sure that if they didn't have time to hit something or something like that, or just forgot, you can have backup. So, number 2, I mentioned osha, right? That Native American plant. Well, 2 things about it. Number 1, osha is wonderful medicine. Its cousin, well, not really cousin, but look-alike, that looks extremely similar, is poison hemlock. Spoiler, but poison hemlock is poisonous. So they look so much alike. The reason we smelled the root is because that's the best way to tell those two apart besides elevation. You can also do some fancy stuff if you really know how to do leaf structure, but everyone else is like, it looks fernish. That's not quite good enough to tell them apart. And so there are poisonous lookalikes. Number one, do your research and have more than one source. Number two, once you're out in the field with more than one source, make sure you identify your plant properly. It's not, oh, the flower looks right, and then you go ahead and eat it. It's not, oh, the leaf looks right, and then you go ahead and assume it's the right plant. You need to do multi-layered. And that's also part of the fun. So, third reason I tell this story is the OSHA also was endangered. That happens more than you might think. There are a number of endangered plants that grow in the Ozarks. One of them is American ginseng. We never harvest American ginseng. We're hoping that it comes back. That's kind of where it is. Echinacea in some areas. Everyone knows echinacea. It's so popular. That's why it's gone in some places. So it's kind of showy, and that didn't really help it for a while there. So we don't tend to harvest echinacea unless we've looked up our area, because there are some areas where it's still okay. This one, I personally don't wildcraft or harvest in the wild here. But we can go and look at it, and it's okay to take a few leaves, but don't take roots and don't take flowers. They're the reproductive parts. So, those are the three reasons for the story. Also because it's a fun story and it's reminiscent of good days. But last safety tip that has nothing to do with the story. If you're on medications, did you know about 70+% of medications originally came from plants? And then they were concentrated or changed and then delivered in various ways. Really cool. It makes sense that there's going to be interactions then, right? I could get really nerdy on that, and I'm not going to. I'm going to leave off the site 3A4 enzymes. So, hopefully. But the point is, if you're on medications, if it's food level dosing for food type plants, you're usually okay unless, grapefruit's one where you don't eat a whole grapefruit along with a whole bunch of medications. One of the ones today actually is kind of like that too. But in general, if it's a food level herb, you're good. If it's I would never eat this as food, but it's medicine kind of herb, you want to check. You want to usually talk to a doctor. They have resources, even if they're not an herbal doctor or a naturopathic doctor, they have resources they can check to make sure you're safe. So, those are the 4 main safety tips. The harvesting rules of thumb to help things not go endangered are in the top right corner on the handout. Basically, if it's common, harvest half or less. If it's uncommon, harvest a third. Try to be sparing on roots and flowers. If it is endangered, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but photographs. So, with that, any questions on safety?
For sourcing, I've noticed a trend now, at least on Bing. I assume other search engines have similar things where there appears to be an AI situation of gathering just stuff related to a topic to get advertising inserts so that people make them money through the advertising. In the gardening ones I've read, if you really read through it and know, some pretty basic things about gardening, you can pretty quickly detect that it's contradicting itself. Any suggestions on sources?
Thank you so much for opening that can of worms that I love. So, sources should be reliable sources. That means Wikipedia will probably, Wikipedia, there's been stuff on there that will get you killed. Don't trust Wikipedia, bad source. Great for brushing up on vaguely something. But good sources are either, how do I put this? People who have a related professional reason to know it is a good place to start. I'll give you a few names so you don't have to go and be like, is this professional enough? You can look up, Green Dean. He's a forager, not an herbalist. So for identifying plants, he's great. He does good research. His real name is Dean Jordan. He lives in Florida, so not everything here, but enough. There's good crossover. That's a good place to start. That's pretty readable. He's not a academic speak sort of person, which is great. For the more medical side of things, Michael Moore. He's amazing. He's like this. He's that guy. He was a practicing herbalist. He passed away in the last decade, but really great guy, great sense of humor, tries to make it readable. Excellent source, any book by Michael Moore. Dr. Patrick Jones in Idaho. He's a veterinarian and an herbalist. He treats people as well, but the veterinarian is like, he's a veterinarian and an herbalist. And then he combines them. He's got really cool stories, but he knows his stuff. I've met him, I've read his stuff, I've gone through. He has proper safety considerations and things like that. Read through those, and you kind of start to get a vibe of like, okay, they are particular, they're careful, they mention things, and then they also have some of them will have sources, some of them will use themselves as a source because they've been doing it like for 50 years before Michael Moore wrote that book, and like in the foreword, he's like, I'm my source. No, that was someone else. He actually still sourced stuff, which is great. There was someone else, Green Dean was, I'm my source. If I had to list them all, I wouldn't write this book. So, those are a few to get started. Besides that, you can also go to PubMed, and those are research articles. So we have clinical, we have forager, and then we have research. Those are the three types of sources I try to get when I'm doing things. And then there's personal experience is the one you get on the fourth one. After you have those three, personal experience is really great. Whether it's someone next to you and it's like, you eat that, and then if I come back tomorrow and you're not dead, I'll try it. That's great. So, in-laws are great. So, great question. Thank you for letting me expound on it. I always hope someone will ask a question about the safety stuff because it's way more interesting to me than it should be. There are old botanists and there are bold botanists, but there are no old, bold botanists. That's what we'll close with there. So, I'm going to go ahead and roll forward. If you have more questions about safety, we can catch them after. Try to harvest from clean sources and stuff like that too. You can learn that one from personal experience too. So, today, let's move into the plants we're going to talk about. So, first, we have this lovely plant of a dozen names. Here's for future you on YouTube. All right. This is field garlic, also called wild garlic, meadow garlic, crow garlic, field onion, and all those other words, onion. So onion and garlic, really the common names, they cross over a lot. So if anyone gets into an adamant argument, this is field garlic, it is not onion, let them have their way, just keep walking, it's all right. It depends on what area you are in, on which one people will swear to their grave that it is. If you go to the scientific name, you can start to get a little bit more precise, which is nice, which is why you want the scientific name. Matter of fact, this is a great example of when you want a scientific name, because if you look up wild garlic, the ones in England come up all over Google, and they're completely different. And the safety advice is not what we need here, except for one thing, thankfully, is across the entire family. But this one is Allium vineale, okay? Vine ale, vineale. And really cool things. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to say garlic, but it's also onion. It's got garlic and onion properties to it. Those two are actually interchangeable. Onion is kind of garlic's little brother when it comes to medical needs. So I guess I'll come around with a different picture instead of the same one. Here's the flower. The flower. It's actually technically a sprouting, fruiting body, I believe, if I recall terminology for it correctly. But the Egyptians, 2,000 plus years ago and more, when they were building the pyramids, they had a great union called no union, slave labor. And the slaves didn't think that was super great one day, and reportedly, I believe it was during, don't quote me, King Tut. It was one of the Ramses, it was one of the ones you've heard of anyway. But the slaves were like, okay, we got a new idea for you. Life is so bad that we would rather die, so make it better or you don't have pyramids. And Ramses was like, I guess that is a threat that you can actually make. What can we do? What can we do? And so they went through the slaves, so they got food at the beginning of every day along with some building materials and stuff. And there's some fun stories in the Bible about building materials if you want to go and read about that. But the food portion had some calorie dense objects in there, but also it had garlic. And the solution, I think it actually was King Tut. I said Ramses, but whatever, I'm a liar. Doubled their garlic. And then all the slaves were like, that's great. Nah, that was enough. And then the slaves were okay to go ahead and start working again. Okay, well, why? Well, back in the day, 15 pounds of garlic was enough to buy an adult male slave. It was valuable. It was considered so valuable you could use it as currency. It was considered strengthening and to keep away sickness. And when you think about it, it makes sense why King Tut would be like, slaves are in revolt, what should I give them? Something that makes them stronger and have less sick days. Win-win. So this is what we call good management of a bad program. And so if we fast forward, though, into Grecian times, they had, the Colosseum, that's Rome, but you know what I mean. They had all the contests of prowess inside the arena. And we have records that show that many Greek combatants and competitors would eat copious amounts of garlic right before going out. Which, number one, is like, how did you not throw that up? You must have had a meal. But number two, it's like they believed it made them stronger and more likely to win and probably kill off their competitor with their breath. So, on the flip side, also in the Grecian country and culture, in the birthing chambers where midwives were helping women have their children, they would hang wild garlic from the rafters. And then the garlic would permeate the room, and they believed it kept away evil spirits and sickness. In today's terms, probably one and the same. If someone got sick, who was to blame back then? Evil spirit, or your brother, And so, fast forward one more time to medieval Europe, about 800 years in the future after that. And we have records of midwives doing the same thing for the same reasons. Now, the reason I tell this is, number one, because I'm a nerd, and number two, because when we see a pattern of, it gives you strength and keeps away sickness. It gives you strength and keeps away sickness. It keeps away sickness, and I don't have another one for strength, but there you go. When we see a pattern like this across multiple cultures and across a lot of time, it suggests there's something going on underneath the surface. So now we're going to come into today, and there's actually some fascinating and really just really interesting research on garlic. Now, the garlic this research was done on was not Allium vineale, but they all share similar compounds in the family. This was on Allium sativum, aka grocery store garlic. But it was found that by some people who presumably all these traditions of garlic being useful went ahead and tested it. And they found for blood cholesterol levels, you were able to lower cholesterol by 15% by taking 1 clove of garlic a day for 3 months. 15% is as much as some medications, to give you an indication there. So if you had a cholesterol of 300, which is too high, it would drop by 60. By 300, I'm up here so I can't do it properly, but we're gonna say 10%, 45, jeez. All right, I used to like math. And so that's a significant drop. Now, something else that it does, so actually, remember how it talked about strength in Egyptian times and Grecian times. One of the things that allows you to, be able to use your full strength, especially when you get in your older years, is having a strong, healthy heart muscle. It's not something that you get chest pain when you start using too much oxygen around. If you have clogged arteries and things, it's not always fun. You get angina, chest pain. And so it's possible when they're talking about strength, maybe it was that they didn't have this issue. So there are actually 3 things in the studies that help with cardiac issues, which are really cool. So I already told you about one of them, cholesterol. But now, second one, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about a janitor. So this janitor is actually about yay big, and he's inside of you and you and you and all of you, and his name is macrophage, okay? He's a janitor for your blood vessels, along with a whole bunch of other stuff in your body. And Mr. Macrophage, he goes through the blood vessels, and he sees that when a blood vessel gets injured, a number of things happen, but one of them is it's more likely to have cholesterol stick up against it. And if a bunch sticks there, that can become a problem, but it's probably helping as a bandage. It's probably on purpose. The body helps that happen. There are other things too, but that eventually needs to come off, right? And so the janitor will come and he'll pick it up and move it back to the liver. And the macrophage does some of that, and there are some other guys who play too, lipoproteins if you want to get technical. But the problem is there's 2 types of cholesterol that can be stuck against the side. And we're going to call those hard or soft cholesterol, oxidized or non-oxidized cholesterol. If it gets oxidized while it's there, or hard, the janitor, instead of picking it up and taking it back to the liver, he works really, really hard and dies. And so that's not fun for him. Unfortunately, this is a Rambo-style janitor. He is loaded with stuff to take care of intruders. And so when he dies, he says, "I'll be back," and dies. But after that, all of his weapons go and hit all the cholesterol. This is what's called a foam cell. In other words, it makes the cholesterol even harder. And that's where we start to get plaque. Atherosclerotic plaque. Anyone ever heard of that? Anyone want to get rid of it? Yeah. So this is what causes a lot of the problems for the hardening and thinning of the arteries. And if you go in and they're like, "Oh, your arteries are 80% occluded," this is what they're talking about. You got a bunch of that stuff. Now, back to garlic. Garlic makes the janitor healthier so that he doesn't die as easy. It also makes the cholesterol softer. LDL cholesterol becomes less oxidized when garlic compounds are present. And so you can actually see, it's a slow process, but if you, there was a study that showed people over a year, it was a good size, I don't remember how many hundred people, but over a year, usually you expect plaque to slowly progress. About 15 of these really complicated units I won't bore you with, but we'll just say 15 plaque units a year for this particular group. People who were taking 1 clove of garlic a day, not only did 80% of those people have no progression, not up or down, but 48% of those people with no other changes, presumably, it's always hard to really, don't change anything for a year, but with no other directed changes. So you always have to take all these studies with a grain of salt, by the way, for that reason. But 48% actually had a reversal. They had their plaque units not go up by 15, but down, and down by 22. And so they went back at 150% of the speed that the building had happened before. That's huge. That would save so many lives if we could have the plaque go down. Last thing that garlic does for the heart that is particularly good, I guess I hit, oh yes. Garlic, through this, but mostly other methods, what's something else that makes the heart work really hard? Blood pressure. Blood pressure. So, if you live in America, you know someone with high blood pressure. That's how it works. Half the time it's the person in the mirror, but we don't need to say that. So, that makes my blood pressure go up. Now it's true. So, garlic was found to have a 5 to 15%, 5 to 15 point drop in systolic blood pressure, and a 5 to 10 point drop in diastolic blood pressure. So top number goes down by 10-ish, bottom number goes down by 7.5-ish. Dropping either of those numbers by 10, I know this is the technical part, this is where I have fun. You'll have fun in just a moment, I promise. But by dropping just the systolic number by 10, we know that it doesn't matter the reason, just in general. If you go and look on the reports of stroke risk. Dropping your blood pressure by 10 points reduces your relative stroke risk by 40%. That's kind of a lot. Strokes are quite debilitating, and they're worth doing something for. Garlic doesn't cost a lot, in case you hadn't noticed. So this is something for like $1 a week if you're buying organic garlic. You can get some really nice tasting medicine. So those are some really cool things about garlic. It's also antimicrobial. It also makes lots of bugs go away because they can't stand your breath either. And really fun story, I had a patient who had an infection in her mouth. And it had been there for a bit and just other things weren't kicking it. And she started doing the garlic thing because I talked about this before. And she started doing that and she called me up and was like, my infection was gone in 3 days. Garlic really helps with the sickness. So there's the sickness side of those things. Garlic is a powerhouse. And the one in the grocery store actually works too. So, fantastic medicine. So, let's go and figure out how to identify it. Now, first thing to know about garlic, there is a poisonous lookalike, okay? So we need to be sure. You can also go to the grocery store, they probably don't have poisonous lookalikes. So, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull this guy out. There's 4, don't quote me on that number, I'm probably gonna change it in 2 minutes, 4 things that you do to identify garlic. There's at least 3 that I really like. First, it looks like really excited grass. It's just a clump that, it's like all the rest of it's like overachiever, but it's all clumped together and excited, and it looks, this is a strand of it that I got here that's been pressed a little bit. But if it was not pressed, you would also see that it's straw-shaped, as in it is hollow. You'll notice that when you break one of those hollow leaves that's in the excited clump, you will get an onion or garlic smell. That is extremely important. All onions and garlics that are edible will have that smell. If it's absent, doesn't matter how much the rest of the plant looks right, it's not the right plant. And the 4th identification mark is, well, I guess, if you look at the color green, it tends to taper as it gets closer to the roots instead of abruptly going green to whitish, creamy, maybe a little bit of other color, but it tends to taper down to that whitish color. But then the more reliable one is you look at the root, and it looks like a pearl onion, about the size of your thumb. And you can peel it off, and it peels like an onion. So, really helps. Now, later in the season, I'll come around with this sprouting, fruiting head. You can also see these guys. And they look like really excited chia pets. Those help, right? See, right there. You can name him if you like. But the excited chia pet here, those are not technically flowers. Onions, garlic, whatever you want to call this, technically skip flowering most of the time because they can just do this and then like sprout the little leaves coming straight out of it. And it's like, we don't need to be fertilized. We're like cutting up a potato and throwing it out there. All the eyes already will just grow. It's kind of like that idea. These up top you would call cloves, usually like Allium sativum in the grocery store. They've made so that it grows bigger underground cloves. With the wild one, we call the things above cloves. They're technically a little different, just so you know. But that will also help you identify. Now, so we had grows in clumps. It's hollow. That's one to star. This actually helps you tell it apart. Smells like garlic, also star. And then the root has peeling layers, and that's also a star. And then you also have the green tapering, and the flower, which is a fruiting body that sometimes is there and sometimes not. Last thing I'll throw in, onion occasionally likes to just treat itself, and it will actually have normal flowers, and so it dresses up, and it's like, I can have flowers too. I don't need them usually, but I can have them anytime I want. So, little bit vain, but there you go, I guess, you know. So the flowers that they can have are not something I want you to try to identify it by. I'm going to tell you about them now. They are white, 6-petaled with symmetrical petaling, and they're pretty. Unfortunately, the look-alike has a flower that is white with 6 petals that is very pretty, which is probably why Onion is like, all right, forget it, I'll take my flower off most of the time. So, the look-alike is called Star of Bethlehem, and Ornithogonium umbellatum, that's what it is. And there are a number of other poisonous lookalikes too, but for this, the rules I'm going to give you apply to all of them. So, Star of Bethlehem, as soon as I tell you everything about it, you're going to be like, why is that a lookalike? Well, let me tell you, and then you can say that. Are you ready? All right. Its leaves are flat. It doesn't smell like garlic. The root has no layers. It's even a little bit red usually sometimes, but it can be creamy. And then it can be creamy white. And then it has a white flower, and it doesn't get the chia pet hair thing going after. And so basically it sounds like, Dr. Goodwin, that everything you said is, it's completely different. Nothing is the same. Well, technically it grows in clumps. So there you go. But this is what I call a 30-foot lookalike, or a hurried forager lookalike. So at 30 feet away, oh yeah, that's totally wild onion, I say confidently, and walking over. And then we get closer, and I just grab it, and it's like, oh, I need a snack. And then hopefully I look at it before I do that, because once you get close, even though the leaves are flat from a distance, they're the same kind of green. They're the same height. They grow in the same places. So you need to know that. So when you get up close, you look at the leaves, you smell, right? And then you can also check the root. Usually those two will get you safe though. Now the hurried forager look-alike thing, this is where, so I have a niece, she's great, she does amazing things, she's never made this mistake. But for example, if I say, I would really like chives on my toast, and she is so nice that she goes out to go and harvest them. And she is doing it really fast. But she's still smelling, right? She still smells. Too bad that the 12th plant now has, you know, all the other onion all over your hand as you're smelling it. Bit of a problem, so you have to look at it. And so if you're a hurried forager, you can fall into that trap where my hand still smells like garlic, you know. So you have to check the leaf structure, because from the corner of your eye, it really does look the same. So be careful of that look-alike. You can have serious complications from it, GI, vomiting, and all that kind of thing. And so if you're sensitive or you have enough of it, it can lead to death. Usually you'll get to the hospital before that happens, but this is a real thing. This is why we talk about safety, because safety matters. So, I need a manual. It's like, safety matters. All right, that way I can make fun of it. Yeah, so, there are multiple other kinds of garlic that don't look like this, or onion that don't look like this, that are also edible. I picked this one for 2 reasons. It grows here plentifully, and it's the easiest to identify safely. So, if you find something else and it doesn't look like this, and it's like your field book says it's garlic, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, it's because there's lots of species, and they can have very different leaves and things. But, the last thing I'll leave you with, probably, if you've been here before, last thing, that's never true. But is that all of the edible species, all of them, smell like garlic and onion. And none of the poisonous ones smell like garlic or onion. And if you ever discover one that does smell like garlic and onion, then I wonder how people haven't been dying for the last, 400 years they've been relying on this technique. But still, we do the other identification too. Okay, we don't just, smells good, oh, that's, please. I actually had one person tell me they did that, and I'm pretty sure that they actually grabbed some from 2 plants. And they had the garlic smell, but they grabbed another plant next to it because they told me that it was like a hurried kind of a thing. And they got some of the poisonous one, and that happened to them. And it was really not a good picture. Thankfully, they ate it, and it was almost really bad. So there we go, now that I've scared you straight. Any questions?
When you spoke of the infection that the lady had, how was she taking it? Was it raw, or like just chewing on it, or in food?
Great question.
You said a clove a day, basically?
Yeah, so she took a clove, and best I can understand, this was a conversational thing, I didn't actually prescribe this one, this was from, and she, I told her to have it fresh, because by the way, fresh is twice as good as powdered. Powdered still counts, but you lose some of it. Aged garlic is like, let's get rid of all the medicinal qualities. Okay, more expensive now. So I believe that she just had fresh crushed.
Oh, okay.
And so she just went for it. By the way, if you have fresh crushed and you just put it straight in your mouth, another property that is an herbal action for garlic is emetic, which means makes you vomit. So I once was like, I wonder if this supplement's good quality. Most garlic supplements are actually not very good. It's like fresh garlic, powdered garlic, supplement garlic is the worst. And so I was like, no, whatever. And I took it, and I hadn't eaten anything. And pretty soon I got to see everything that I hadn't eaten. So it actually had a good job, guys. You didn't overheat it in your compacting process. I'm proud of you. So it's emetic. Please have food beforehand. I actually managed to stop it before it, but it felt like it was going to. So for any who are grossed out, you can now ungross yourselves out.
You said not heat it too much. If you cook your fresh garlic, does that change it?
It does, excellent question. If you cook it, it will decrease the medicinal value but not eliminate it. Unless you cook it for like in a slow cooker. If you do a slow cooker for 6 hours, all bets are off. Enjoy your garlic flavored white powder. But slow cookers, especially when there's any moisture in there, are the opponent of nutrition. Not that it's zero, I shouldn't make it sound, oh, my slow cooker, and never use it again. No, okay, I'm a little anal. You don't have to be as anal as me. But it does decrease garlic if you cook it, especially in the presence of moisture. Water is very much breaking down nutrition when heat is added. It's fine for, half an hour, 2 hours. But 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, too much. If you want the best garlic quality, you can have freshly minced, not from the pre-minced containers. Those don't count. I'm sorry. Those are preserved in water and they're so convenient, and I have one at my house. But for the medicinal quality, you need freshly depapered garlic. It's okay if it's been on your shelf for months. It keeps fine that way. But once you cut it, enzymes start find the allicinase and the allicin find each other, and then they break up to make all the active compounds. And so that's why they can preserve so well, unless water's there to make stuff happen earlier. And why crushing is what starts it. And so you've actually got a chemistry experiment going as soon as you crush garlic. It's really fun. But for the cooking, if you add it at the end, or you only lightly saute, or whatever term you want to use, makes me sound like I know how to cook, then you're good. That's negligible. If it's in there for 5 minutes or less, that's fine. Good question. Any other questions? Any other tangents?
What about fermented garlic, like in honey?
Fermented garlic. Ooh, that reminds me of something fantastic. So, good question. I have suspicions, but I haven't looked up studies, and so I'm not going to say one way or the other for sure, but I will tell you another thing about garlic, and not fermented, but you made me think of gut microbiome. I will answer as close to your question as I can, though. I do know that garlic that's not fermented, but garlic that is infused into honey, so garlic honey or honey garlic, that is medicinally active. It will not be as strong as the garlic straight, because not everything will extract, and you have to leave it there long enough for it to actually extract. But it works, so that's good. Other thing, garlic, it's antimicrobial and kills a whole lot of things, right? So what do you think it does to your gut microbiome, all the good bugs down in your intestines that are supposed to make jobs work? It probably kills them. No, it doesn't. It's been with us for thousands of years. And the guys down there are actually used to garlic. And so they're like, bring it. they actually feed on it. They have adapted through our thousands of years of garlic-human relations. And so now all of them who are trying to make us live a good life, because that's how they get a good life, that's why they're called the good guys, they've adapted through thousands of years to do a really good job of helping us. They've also adapted to be able to survive our diet. And so we get this really crazy idea of precision antibiotics from natural foods, where they kill bad guys and not the good guys. And if you ever say that without context on a comment board, things only kill the bad guys and not the good guys, people will tear you apart. Antimicrobials kill everything. That's why. How would they know? They don't have a brain. Yes, but they have science and time. So it's really cool. You actually see that some of our, I think it was Bifidobacter, don't quote me on the strain, but that you actually saw an increase in this healthy guy called Bifidobacter in our gut when you were taking garlic daily. So that's as close to fermented microbes and honey as I can get for those two. Thank you for the tangent that I can run on. Did I answer your question okay?
You did, thank you.
Fantastic. I got one over here and then I'll bounce over there.
Yes.
Just a quick question on the whole crushing, and then maybe you said this before I came in, but my friend said you need to do it and let it sit for a while. Is there a time that you already said?
I didn't, and that's an excellent question.
Okay.
If you want the utmost potency, that is true. Generally going through your digestive tract is long enough, I don't tend to worry about it. But if you crush it, and I actually don't know a particular time frame because I know the reaction begins, but it takes a few hours to go through you. And taking a clove a day straight is what all the studies were done on, and so they didn't let it sit beforehand. So the results that I told you were taking it without that extra.
And just okay to chew it with peanut butter?
Sure.
I find that really balances out the burn and doesn't upset your stomach.
Awesome. It's, yeah, if you can get something that helps with that, there's masking flavors. Awesome. Over here.
That was kind of similar to what I was going to ask, is like, for you specifically, personally, how do you take your garlic each day?
Over eggs on toast. So yeah, just top it on anything.
Okay.
And then it's like, anything's better with garlic. Fruit smoothie? You know, garlic goes well with just about everything. Awesome question. All right, so last time I gave this presentation, I didn't even get to say the name of the next plant because it's so cool over here, right? I'm gonna go ahead and move on just so that we can not make Queen Anne's lace feel too bad. All right, so we're gonna move to our second plant, or third if you're including a poisonous lookalike. Star of Bethlehem was the name. Don't eat it. So, Queen Anne's lace, Docus carota. You might notice carota sounds an awful lot like carrot. Well, it is indeed wild carrot. There's also Docus bacilla, which is American wild carrot, which is smaller. This is now, however, naturalized practically. It's been here for so long, the non-American one, Docus carota. Fun stories around this one. What time is it? Oh, yeah, so many stories that you'll have to come and listen to another time. But I'll tell you one. Which one? Dang. All right, so it's called Queen Anne's lace, right? So the story goes that Queen Anne was sitting in a field of wild carrots, embroidering a beautiful pattern of a carrot flower into some cloth. And she had just finished it, probably in a very posh accent. Oh, it's beautiful, you know. And then she pricked her thumb, and a drop of blood fell in the very center of the pattern. And it's like, oh, it's ruined. Now here's where you get to find out magic exists in the world. All the carrot flowers in the fields, they say, bowed their heads down to the queen. And when they came back up, they all had a red dot in the center to honor her embroidery as correct and beautiful. Except for like 3 in the back that apparently were the American renegades and didn't honor the queen, because they don't all have that red dot. So, treason. And those are the ones that kind of came over here. So we've got a 50-50 blend on whether or not it's going to have that red dot in the center. But in colonial days here, carrot was actually used in a number of interesting ways. We're going to start with carrot seed and work our way down. Actually, we'll probably go seed, root, and then stem. So carrot seed, really quick, let me explain why I'm coming around again. You are not going to be able to see this unless you have luck. But there is a tiny red flower that shriveled up just so shyly after I pressed it. But there's this tiny little black rectangle that technically is the red flower. This one over here has no red flower. It'll probably look the same to you, but you're going to come around. The one on your left technically has a little red flower that shriveled up into a tiny little thing. All the rest of them are supposed to be white, and they are, or creamy yellow, or what have you. But carrot seed is a hormone suppressor, which is something very interesting. It needs to be ground up for the action to happen, because we don't break down carrot seed wholes very well in our digestive system. And so we wouldn't get the action there. It suppresses estrogen to a degree, not like completely, and progesterone to a degree. And it also does one other super nerdy thing, which is why I like you. It suppresses G6PD enzyme action. Ooh, all right, what does that mean? So first let me tell you what they used it for, and then I'll explain that. Colonial women would actually use carrot seed, Docus carota or Docus bacilla, and grind it up and take it. They would use it, so they found their one and only, and then they go and they make love, and they're like, oh, actually we're not ready for a family yet. Panic, carrot seed. And so it's a contraceptive because it suppresses all the hormones that make that happen. And one of the things that keeps the implanting soon-to-be but not yet fetus able to do its replication in things is the G6PD enzyme, which acts in other cells too, but it mostly affects here. You don't really worry about it for the grown-up cells as much as in the fetus. So we can talk lots of nerd there later. But anyway, so you take some for 3 days, sometimes 10 days, it depends on exactly who you listen to, teaspoon to a tablespoon, etc. And then that usually would do the trick. And there was an enterprising group of researchers who actually tried to go out and find research for this. It's really hard to do research on something like this. And so they found people who were already practicing it and logged all of the interviews and were like, you can't exactly prove that they're not all making it up, but they found dozens and dozens, and it's been found in dishes. It does actually inhibit estrogen. It does actually inhibit progesterone. It does actually inhibit the G6PD enzyme. And so it makes sense mechanistically, and there are people who are actually still doing it today. And I actually have come across, occasionally people don't want to do hormonal birth control because it does some other things to their rhythm, and sometimes this has come up as a possible option among some others. So, fascinating. Now, Queen Anne's lace or carrot, going down to the root, Native Americans would use the root as a blood purifier. Now, in herbalist speak, blood purifier is alterative, is what we would say. It means that it helps the blood be vaguely better. How's that for something really great? So, alterative as a word is really vague, but if we zoom into carrot specifically, that's a little less vague. Carrot helps with liver function. And so that helps with processing a lot of things. Liver is one of your blood's best friends. Matter of fact, it's everyone in the body's best friend. Your favorite organ is probably your brain or your heart. Your brain and your heart's favorite organ is the liver. And maybe the heart, because the heart's kind of important. And so if you get the liver to be able to detoxify pathways 1 and 2 better, then you have less irritation throughout the rest of the body. And the other thing the Native Americans, the Iroquois in particular, used it for was for skin issues. Guess what happens when the liver gets overburdened or starts sharing its load of detoxification? And there's always more details we can talk about, but he calls in his sidekick. The skin, actually, when we actually sweat not only to remove heat, but also to remove toxins. Or garbage, if you want to call it that. Toxins makes it sound like poison. It's not always that bad, but it just means stuff the body doesn't need, garbage. Heavy metals have been found in sweat. Lead, not all kinds, but lead, for example, can come out in sweat. And that's really nice. So exercising helps you get rid of some, extra burden there. And sometimes when we have this stuff coming out in our sweat, we can get a rash because we've got garbage all over there. And the pores are like, this is irritating the rest of the body, it's irritating me too. I guess I'm the fall guy, and trying to help out. And so it makes sense. The liver, the blood, and the skin. If it helps the liver and helps detoxify, all three of those that pattern fits. And it bears out in research. So, really cool stuff about wild carrot there. So, wild carrot is a little different than grocery store carrot. Grocery store carrot is still good. I'm not going to go into all the differences because I got 4 minutes. But I guess what I'll stop on here is poisonous lookalike. Need to go into this one. Poisonous lookalike. This plant on the left is just an extra from, I'm not presenting on wild parsnip. It's just these two, okay? We have wild carrot all the way here on, okay, fine. Your right is the one that's not there, whatever. Wild carrot is the one on the side, and poison hemlock is the one in the middle. Thankfully, wild carrot and poison hemlock look a little bit more different than OSHA and poison hemlock. But you need to know these differences. Poison hemlock does grow in the area, and it is one of the easily top 5 poisonous plants in North America. So, wild carrot, how do we identify it? Well, step 1 is not by the leaves, unless you're professional. The leaves look similar. That's the part that makes it look like. The flowers also kind of look similar. So what else do we have? We have the stem. And we have the smell. All right, let's talk about the stem first. So wild carrot, well, I'll talk about the whole thing. Wild carrot stands about yay-ish tall, plus or minus a whole lot. I guess usually it's actually there. I got excited. And its flowers come out in an umbel, where they're kind of flat like that. And the leaves are lacy and ferny, but the stem is hairy. It might not look like, oh, it's got fur, but it's definitely hairy. Poison hemlock's stem is smooth. Smooth bad. All right. Wild carrot smells like carrot. Poison hemlock, according to the books, I've never done the reference to check, but the books say it smells like mouse urine. I just say it smells bad. I have smelled it, I've had to kill it, and I have to go do it again. Those seeds thankfully only last for 2 to 3 to 4 years, and then they stop. But it's not 20 at least, so I don't know. Fun story about a corrupted seed stock. So the other way, those are the 2 major ways. Also, poison hemlock. I guess I'll keep doing it in the same order. Wild carrot. Wild carrot has green stems with occasional brown or something like that, but poison hemlock will have usually not always, purple splotches, like a really messy spray painter or graffiti artist came out, and they're just all over it. So you can also look at the leaf structure if you're really botanically inclined, and there's, I want to say that carrot is compound pinnate, that one, but then poison hemlock is compound bipinnate. So there you go, giant difference. I'm not going to explain that one. So with that, I think the last thing that I'll mention here is when you are dealing with wild carrot stem, the sap can have, here I'll just tell this. This will be my closing remark story thing. If you go to a pub and the bartender is, it's a fancy place and he's making a drink that I totally know the name of that uses lemon around the rim, and then he flicks sugar on it. And he does that like 40 times in a row, and then he goes out and his hands are cramping. He goes out in the sunshine. It's like, I smell like dish soap, and boom, blisters. As soon as he gets outside and the sun hits it. Bartender's blisters is what they're called. Inside of lemon and lime are compounds called furanocoumarins. Those are harmless until they're on your skin and in the sun. They're also what's found in grapefruit. by the way, that messes with, don't have grapefruit with your medication, furanocoumarins. So if you rub grapefruit juice all over yourself and go out in the sun, bully for you, that's gonna be fun. Carrot stalk sap has furanocoumarins as well. And so if you're breaking it off and trying to get the roots and all that stuff and you're not wearing gloves, memorable evening that's ahead of you. You're gonna have bartender's blisters and it's gonna be, oh, did you get a new job? Everyone's gonna know what you were doing. So, everyone who's anyone. Anyway, so the furanocoumarins are a thing to be aware of. Yeah, so that's where we're gonna go ahead and cut it for that section. Always go and do good research before you harvest. Remember, there are poisonous lookalikes. The little closing bit, this is a monthly event. Next month it is on the 3rd Thursday at 5:30, just like it was this month. And then after that, we're gonna go back to 2nd, maybe Tuesdays, maybe Thursdays. I'm talking about that right now. But next month it's 3rd Thursday at 5:30. And also, number 2, I am a naturopathic doctor. If you are interested in naturopathic doctor version of help, I have a clinic. There's a free sign up over there for a free 15-minute consult to see if we're a good fit, because no one knows what the heck a naturopathic doctor does, so we usually get a lot of questions. So feel free to sign that if you would like. And that's what I've got for you. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.